Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AAIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
Welcome to the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, bringing you practical, timely, and accurate insights so that you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, February 2nd, episode 216. Today, we talk about sourcing and how to navigate your way to the right talent. The perfect fit for your opening is out there, but every wrong turn wastes time, burns resources, and increases your chances of getting lost along the way. Kris Gfell, HR Business Manager at AAIM, joins us to offer insights into what methods our HR by the Hour team is implementing to successfully source talent. Look who's back, it's Burt, and he's going to let us peek inside his briefcase, which is full of breaking news and employment law. Remember to grab the mic anytime, send us your questions, and take the poll. All this and more on This Week at Work.
Thank you for joining us again. And it is cold but warming up, but not as much as Burt Garland's going to warm your hearts. Welcome back, Burt. We're so happy to have you back on the program. How was your trial? We're excited to hear about it.
Well, trial is quite an experience, Phil. It is. It's not something for the faint of heart. We ended up having almost a full 2-week trial in federal court here in downtown St. Louis on a nasty trade secrets case. I am happy to report that we prevailed on 24 of our 25 counts, although our victory is a little bit tempered because we did not recover the amount of damages we had hoped to recover. But we were successful in vindicating our client and some other positive results in the case. We just were a little light on our damages, but all in all, happy to be back. I'm done with those 16 to 18 hour days for 23 days in a row.
Yeah, it looks like you. No one brought you a razor or anything. You got your Mountain Man shirt on. You're going back to our COVID look here. I don't know between
exactly.
You and Kris. Maybe Kris is going to take you deer hunting or something like that up in Michigan. He likes to go deer hunting up in Michigan. All right, so Burt, Tom did a great job. I know he idolizes you a little bit. I could tell. He first came on the program. He had a little beard, shaved look or unshaved look going, and then. He made fun of you a lot. I got to tell you that. I tried to have your back the best I could, but he was really making fun of you. But he did a good job, and I hope the team at Ogletree gives him a nice pat on the back. I know I will when we see him, and we enjoyed having him on the program. But nothing like our buddy Burt being back on the program. We got a good show today.
Phil, I did hear from Tom. If I have friends like you having my back, I certainly don't need enemies. Yeah. From what I heard from Tom.
Yeah, that might be the case, Burt. But I know I've listened to the program when I'm not on, and it's just paybacks, and you know what they say about those. All right. Hey, Nick, I think you got a little treat for Burt, don't you?
I do. Just sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
Oh, boy.
Did you order the code red? You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Burt, that's the vision I have right there.
Exactly. There you go.
That
it was something like that.
Excellent. Great job there, producer Nick. Anything else you want to show us? I'm afraid of the next one. I know you said you had a second surprise.
Well, it is a special day out there, Phil, and maybe we're going to the well one too many times, but here we go.
Phil? Hey, Phil? Phil? Watch out for that first step. It's a doozy.
I love that.
Groundhog Day today, right? We got our groundhog right back here on the screen behind us, and
he's looking a little threatening over your shoulder there, Phil. He's ready to pounce.
I prefer the white squirrel, the rally squirrel that we had, our COVID friend, but not the groundhog. Is a little scary there, but nevertheless, today's Groundhog Day, so I don't know what you're hoping for, but I sure hope summer gets here quicker than not, and let's hope for something good there, a little bit of fun with that. All right, so we have a poll question for everyone today, and let's see here where my poll question is. Give me 1 second.
How about I bail you out a little bit here, Phil? The
Go
poll
ahead,
question
bail me
today
out.
is, what is the biggest problem recruiters face? And we have some options here. We have the talent is not available, standing out amongst all the noise. We also have competing with other companies, accurately evaluating candidates, understanding what management really wants, and finally, time and resources.
And we love the comments as always. I know that we always have some fan favorites, and I enjoy the insight of those comments. So, all right, let's get started. Burt is back. We got some really important things to talk about with our 6 minutes of lawyer on the clock. Burt, are you ready?
I'm ready, Phil. Let's
All right,
do it.
let's kick it off, Nick.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
All right, so we've got 4 topics I want to cover today. The first is dealing with the Illinois Paid Leave for All Workers Act. On January 10, Governor Pritzker, for our friends over in Illinois, signed a bill called the PLFAW Act, again, Paid Leave for All Workers Act. It's set to take effect January 1 of 2024, so we've got time to prepare for it. You'll hear me talk about it again as the day gets closer. But for now, just know that Illinois joins Maine and Nevada as the 3rd state to require private employers to provide employees with earned paid leave that can be used for any reason. What this specifically does is it gives employees up to 40 hours of paid leave during a 12-month period that they can take for any reason. And while unused leave will carry over year to year, employers are not required to provide more than 40 hours of paid leave in each designated 12-month period. Employers alternatively may front load 40 hours of leave at the beginning of each 12-month period. If they do so, carryover will not be required. Very importantly, under this new law, paid leave, quote, may be taken by an employee for any reason of the employee's choosing, end quote. And very importantly, the employer cannot require that an employee explain the reason for leave or provide documentation in support of it. If the need for leave is foreseeable, an employee will need to provide at least 7 days notice of the leave. If it's unforeseeable, employees will need to provide notice as soon as practical. The upshot for this, I think, is that under this new law over in Illinois, it may actually end up, well, maybe it's not an upshot, a downshot for this is that it may end up actually penalizing employees because employers may scale back the leaves that they actually offer to employees. I doubt that'll happen in too many circumstances. The upshot of this law is that most employers offer leaves in excess of what this law requires. And so it's probably not going to have to be adjusted too much. Okay.
So when we think about that first, like your PTO vacation policy, that may be part of the leave or may indeed be the leave that you need to provide. It just might, you might have to change your policy as to when you allow the leave or the requirements in taking the leave.
Correct. That's
one thing
exactly
that comes
right.
to mind. The thing that is interesting about that when I was reading it was the employee is not required to tell you about it, but they need to ask in advance if possible. But as an employer, you can say, well, why didn't you ask in advance? The employee can go, I just want to use my rights not to discuss it.
Exactly. That's right. I think you nailed the difficulty there. It's going to look somewhat like FMLA in that respect, that you have to give notice 30 days in advance if it's foreseeable. If it's not foreseeable, you have to give notice as soon as practicable. But I agree with you, Phil, that the ability of the employer to really push here and determine whether the leave was foreseeable or not is going to be difficult. We'll have to see how this new law shakes out.
All right. And there'll be more to come on that. I'm sure we'll discuss it as it gets closer. But for our employers with locations in Illinois, be aware that's going on. Okay, Burt, keep going. You're on the clock.
All right. Next one is OSHA announces a very aggressive plan to address employer workplace safety in 2023. OSHA, basically what they're saying here is they can issue instance by instance fines for violations of OSHA. On January 26, OSHA issued a press release that said that their goal is to save lives, target employers who put profit over safety, and hold employers to greater accountability. The bottom line with this new guidance is that in general industry, so most businesses, general industry, agriculture, maritime, and construction industries, OSHA is going to be issuing these instance by instance citations. This will start on March 27th of this year. And what this means instance by instance is that for situations that OSHA identifies as high gravity serious violations of OSHA, that OSHA can go ahead and issue these fines, and it relates to lockout, tagout, machine guarding, permit required confined space, respiratory protection, falls, trenching, and other cases with other than serious violations specific to record keeping. And what they are saying here is that instance by instance citations should normally be based on consideration of one or more factors. And these factors are that the employer has received a willful, repeat, or failure to abate violation within the past 5 years. The employer has failed to report a fatality, inpatient hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye. The proposed citations are related to a fatality or catastrophe, and that the proposed record-keeping citations are related to injury or illness that occurred as a result of a serious hazard. I think that the bottom line here is that what they're saying.
I think that last one's the tough one, right? I mean, it's clear when someone has, an injury with amputation, hospitalized, loss of life or eye, but a illness or injury due to a serious hazard, that the serious hazard bit, that's the tricky one for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that what they're really talking about here is that it's going to be easier for OSHA to issue citations on an instance by instance instead of kind of having to group injuries and severe conditions. They're going to be able to go instance by instance, which just is another way of saying that OSHA is going to continue to be more aggressive under the Biden administration.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. Next one I want to talk about is this one I'll talk about really briefly. Congress eases criminal offense restrictions for employment with financial institutions. Part of the defense bill that was signed in December of last year is a provision called that is called fair hiring in banking. And what this means is that now there are less criminal convictions that would exclude people from being hired in the banking industry. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about this in too much detail. If you are in the financial industry, just be aware that your ability, kind of consistent with state law ban the box efforts, this is somewhat consistent and basically sets limitations on an employer to exclude people from working in the banking industry if they have prior criminal convictions.
Yeah. All right.
All right. The last one
more complicated to hire in certain industries. Gotcha.
The last one I want to talk about, this one's pretty significant. Religious minorities right now are looking to benefit from a new accommodation test. And there's a case that's up in front of the Supreme Court right now. I do want to talk about this because I think this will have a significant impact. There's a decades-old precedent out there that makes it relatively easy for employers to deny religious accommodation requests under a federal anti-bias law. You'll recall that during COVID, I had suggested that most employers should probably skip the piece of the analysis on whether the employee holds a sincerely held religious belief and get right to the accommodation question, because under the accommodation question, it's a pretty light standard that employers can refuse a religious accommodation if it imposes a minimal undue burden or cost on the business. So in this respect, it's a much lighter standard than under the ADA. The case that's in front of the Supreme Court involves a Christian letter carrier's challenge to the United States Postal Service's denial of religious objection to deliver packages for Amazon on Sundays. And this really could have a major impact on believers, especially of minority faiths, who are disproportionately more likely to file religious charges related to denied accommodations. And what they're looking at here specifically is whether the standard should be heightened from that standard of minimal undue burden or cost on the business to more of a significant undue burden or undue cost to the employer. And this would make it look a lot more like the analysis that we go through under the ADA. So this case is before the United States Supreme Court right now. And I do think that if there's a change here, this will impact employers fairly significantly.
Yeah, interesting. All right. So lots going on.
Always.
We had a question here. I think Patricia is asking, as it relates to the Illinois 40 hours of leave. I think she's asking, isn't that after 90 days of employment? I didn't get to that part of it in particular, Burt. I don't know if that comes top to mind for you. I believe that's her question. If I didn't get your question right, Patricia, resubmit that and tell us a little bit more about what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
I'm sure there's something that qualifies it. What I remember reading is that how you earn it was so much time per hour of work is what I thought I saw in there. There was an earning schedule, but I don't remember referencing after 90 days of employment.
Yeah, I'm not recalling that either right now, but yeah, I think we'll learn a lot more about this law as it comes to fruition and gets closer to implementation next year. I am looking off to a side monitor to see if I can see anything about a 90 days requirement here. Phil, I think what you're talking about is whether the employee accrues the leave over the course of the year or whether the employer makes the decision to front load the leave at the beginning of the year. And I do see actually right now that employees must be able to start using their paid leave after 90 days of employment or 90 days after the effective date of the bill, whichever is later. But employers do have the choice to allow their workers to use paid leave before that time.
All right. Well, that is good information for our listeners. Good stuff. Hopefully we probably saved you a little bit of money. We gave you some legal insight there, but not legal, proper protected guidance. If you need more help, make sure you reach out to Burt, Tom, and the Ogletree family there and seek the great assistance that they can provide. Okay, let's get on to Philbert's Forum, because I know Nick has posing some questions to us. He wants to test our knowledge. So we got a question for all three of us here. We're going to see if we can get answers right. Nick, want to kick it off?
You've just entered Philbert's Forum, where we peel the onion back and take a lighter look at the workplace.
All right, I'm going to take the first question, and Burt, you get a chance at trying to guess the answer right here. So here's the question, and what you're trying to guess is, was this person hired or not hired? That's your options of answers, and here is the scenario. Hi, I last contacted you in February seeking work. Normally, someone of my experience and skill set would be employed immediately. I would like to discuss the reason I am still on the market, preventing wasting anyone's time. I'm a convicted felon in California, Georgia, and in federal courts. I am the victim in each case. Burt, hired or not hired?
In 2023 versus 2015, I'm going to still say not hired.
All right, Nick, the answer is not hired. All right. Well done. All right, Burt, you take it.
Of course, we would have gone through our individualized analysis with this employee, gotten to the bottom of what the convictions were, the time since the conviction, the nature of the conviction, and then determined whether or not that employee was suitable for employment.
Our This Week at Work listeners would be doing that, and we call that the interactive process.
Individualized assessment.
Individualized assessment.
Yes.
There you go.
All right. I'll take this one for you, Phil. How about this? After acting After acing the interview and shaking the hands of her potential new bosses, she turned to exit and opened the door. Instead of stepping out into the corridor as she expected, she walked into a cupboard. Instead of admitting to her mistake, she stayed in there. After a few minutes, the 3 interviewers opened the cupboard and asked her if she was okay. She said, "Yes, I was just exploring my potential new company, hired or not hired."
Oh, so I'm putting myself in that spot, and I've been on some very crazy interviews, no doubt, in my career. Someone walks out into a cupboard and then stays in there for a few minutes. I'm not hiring that person, Burt. I'm just not. I can't get my head around the goofiness of that, and I just don't have time for that. Nick, the answer is hired. Huh?
Bill,
All right.
I think that makes sense. I think if she laughed it off and joked it off and was honest with her employer and said, "Oh my God, went into the cupboard. I'm so embarrassed. I just stayed in here," that might have shown a little bit of vulnerability and humor. So who knows?
I really think it all depends on for me, it's like how she actually handled that, if she played it off. But yes, I get it. All right, I got one more here for you. Kris, I'm going to have you join the fun, okay? This one's for you. Perfect. You are our hiring expert. We're going to have you talking with the group here in just a second, so no pressure here, Kris. This guy was looking for an entry-level job as a junior software engineer after having just completed a coding boot camp with no real prior work history. The third sentence in his resume read, "I look forward to raising the average intelligence of your company." He thought, without having ever met anyone on the team, that he was going to be more intelligent than half of them. Hired or not hired?
Well, this one's interesting. So again, I'm going to go back as an HR guy, right? And been practicing a while. I'm gonna look back. All right, do you meet requirements? Let's look at that first. I want to make sure that I'm not going to weed somebody out who may meet some things, but coming in at an entry level job, not much experience, and then adding in I'm going to raise the average intelligence. I'm probably going to go with, I'm not going to hire this person. From that perspective.
You got it, Kris. You're our hiring expert. Yeah, but there's a little bit of arrogance there. I understand the fun part of that and the confidence. And I've seen little statements like that in resumes that, personally, I really don't care for that when I'm looking at a resume, but it is subjective. But I like how you answered it because we knew Burt was listening.
That's right.
So great job.
Well, in that respect, I do want to point out, Kris, you and I did really, really a good job there. We both got our answers correct.
Yeah,
exactly. That's the goal.
That's why I have you guys on the program. I mean, come on, I'm not going to bring some lackeys on here. All right. Okay, well, that's Philbert's form. Nick, great job on that one. I enjoy it. Let's take a look at our poll results. What do we have coming out so far? All right, so 33.4% say not enough talent is available, and then the next one is competing with other companies. And I couldn't agree more. Those would be the top two. Nick, I sent you a chart here. I want to kick off with Kris for a minute. If you can pull that up, and anyone that's kind of been in any of my presentations recently, including the Ogletree labor law update that we did, I've shared this chart, and I keep sharing it because I think it is so important for us to understand, and it's not going to change. Not for 20 years. This is not going to change, but basically, we're just used to an expanding population between that age group of 15 and 64 across the United States. It's been expanding, at a rate to 20 to 30 million people a year. And we've been able to absorb that into the workforce. And now since 2020, it's been flattening to where it's only going to expand 5 million over the next 20 years. So when we talk about there not being enough talent and the competition is getting tougher and tougher, this is the explanation behind that. And there's not going to be more talent, and the competition is going to continue to get tough. So Kris, I'm teeing it up for you here. As I want to talk with you, and thank you for being on the program today to talk a little bit about sourcing. because it's not something that most companies partake in, but it's a great way to help assist the recruiting process. So maybe you can just start, Kris. For those of you that don't know Kris, he works for us here at AIM. He is stationed in Indiana. He's a Michigan native. We won't hold that against him. He likes the big blue there. But Kris, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what is sourcing and how is that different from a retained search?
So no, Phil, it's a good question. And sourcing first and foremost is, going and finding candidates. It's not the post and pray. It's, post a job ad and hope we get candidates. Whereas that's like a recruiting, getting into managing a candidate. Sourcing is you got to go and find. And there's different ways to do that. But, when you get into recruitment, and especially on the retained side where you're like, all right, it's one specific position we're going after. There's just different ways to approach it, right? You can be active, you can be passive. Active meaning, all right, I'm going to go out there and use my tools. I'm going to have a strategy around it and really build what my company is looking for from that sourcing perspective. Passive side, I'm looking to go find people who maybe aren't looking in the market, which I can tell you today, there's a lot of, look at the unemployment numbers. As being pretty low, candidates can be very difficult to find. So using this passive sourcing technique can be very helpful, but it takes time. It takes effort and resources within a company to really move forward with it.
So when we post and pray versus sourcing, when someone engages with you and your team for sourcing, at that point, there are several activities. What kind of happens first? Someone says, "Hey, Kris, help us out with sourcing." What do we do?
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions that come up from my side and from our staff side, really trying to gauge where are you at today, because we want to meet you where you are. We want to have the discussion about, all right, what's been successful for you? What do you think you need? And then we're going to get into, all right, here's our process that we want to walk through. Do we have alignment with hiring managers? Have we looked at education, experience, what is really needed for the job, knowing that some of this can be difficult, especially in a specialized role. And then we're going to, really get into looking at the job itself with the hiring team. So a lot of times we work directly with HR leaders, directors, managers, but ideally we're talking to the hiring team. Who's the hiring managers? Who are some of the interviewers? We want to get to know the job just as much as internally they do and understand the role. From a sourcing perspective, that helps really pinpoint who we're going after and who you're finding, especially on the passive candidate side.
Now, sometimes when that happens, I know from the experiences that I've been in conversations, sometimes what that does is it provides more focus. And at that point, that focus gets into little details that might be roadblocks in the candidate search. So sometimes I've seen it where someone says, do you really need a college graduate to do this role? And through, the interactive process and discussion, we discover, what, we really don't need that. What we need is something other than that. And then when we go out and source and try and find that candidate that's kind of passive in the market, that opens up a market that the employer themselves haven't tapped into. One, because they have a different set of criteria. And then two, because most employers don't have the capacity to go out and seek passive candidates.
Yeah, Phil, and directly to that, the organization has to be able to be with whoever's recruiting for them, whether it's internal or external, almost a step back and reevaluate if they're not getting the candidate flow that may be expected or anticipated, because these roadblocks are in place. And those roadblocks being, the candidates are looking at salary extremely close today. They're looking at what perks of the job there are. Is it remote, hybrid? All those things are very much in play. And when we find what we find works well is really that consultative approach that comes through. So working with the HR leaders, working with the hiring teams to give information back, right? Here's where you're at with candidates. Here's everybody we've talked to. Here's the trends that we're seeing. And I can tell you every single recruitment that happens sees different trends. Whether it's salary, it's remote, it's, what time of day somebody's expected to work. All these things come into play, but it's having that consultative nature to go back and share, Here's the information where we are. What do we need to shift gears on? What do we need to change midstream in order to go and find the talent that's really needed? Because sometimes, and we just do this, is the organization maybe doesn't even know what the candidate experience is like, or how many other opportunities a candidate may really be looking at. So we try to bring all of that back together during your recruitment. So it's, you plan up front, but you have to then readjust and reassess as you go through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great insight, is that you get some information back, right? When we're out and we're just posting and praying, we really don't get a lot of information. We just get some resumes maybe, or we get a lot of resumes, but maybe not the candidates we're looking for. But that's not the information that we need to manage our business. So that's great insight, and something that I know many people don't expect to get, but appreciate, and then make adjustments to improve their business. Hey, I want to say good morning to Martin. Martin, I haven't seen you join the chat for a while, so thank you for being back. Patricia, thanks for that clarity. I see that there. And yes, it does accrue, and yes, they have to wait the 90 days as we've been looking at that. So thanks for that clarity as well. Kris, will you be in St. Louis the end of next week? I know I'm going to be in Indianapolis and then back here in St. Louis for the summit. Are you here next week for the summit?
I am trying to be. My schedule's a little up in the air right now, but if everything works out, then I will be there for the summit.
All right, great. Well, he may be there for the summit. You can get more information from him. That is on Friday. At the factory here in Chesterfield Valley. We will be leading off with our first guest that morning will be yours truly, Burt Garland. So we'll see what kind of look Burt comes in with, that standard lawyer look or the mountain man look. Either one, we're going to get great information from Burt. We're going to have good music, pancakes, bacon, sausage, eggs, orange juice, coffee. It's going to be, a fun environment. Any AIM event is always fun. At this point, we have about 270 people attending. It's far better attended than it was last fall when we did it. You can still join and sign. That will be simulcast by Feature Group. They do a good job bringing it right to you if you're not able to make it in person and you're listening from afar. And I believe the price for that's only like $49 a head. I mean, you can't beat the price for a half day of learning. It is quite a bargain, because I know what your rates are, Burt. So I know the bargain that they're getting. So let's also take into account some good practices people are following after that. Many of our members that are joining us are bringing 3, 4, 5 people to the summit, and afterwards they're doing some team building events and planning for their year for 2023. That's just some good practice that I've heard. I want to share that with anyone that is planning to attend. It's a good time to take the rest of the afternoon and then do some planning, maybe about what you've learned or what is in front of you to do. So with that wraps up this week at work. We will be back here next Thursday, and we'll see you at the summit on Friday. Take care. Be good to each other. Until then, bye-bye.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.